live, Vegas on the screen, feeling the flow, so pristine. Boom, as the beats align, electric dreams, they intertwine.
All right, let's do a show off and running after a couple of weeks. It is the Gameday Huddle, back in action from the Go Live Vegas studio. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, Jimmy Garino, the gang is all here, and a good timing because we have plenty to discuss in the world of sports. Obviously, this is one of the most eventful time of year in the sports calendar. But as I just found out, Steve and myself both found out, apparently it was eventful in the world of just the personal lives regarding the sports scene, particularly out here in Las Vegas, regarding, the youth sports, right? So, Jimmy, you could break this down better than I can. I've seen the video evidence now. I'm dumbfounded as well as anybody. But apparently our own Jimmy Garino in his daughter's last ever softball game made a bit of a stand. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, as you guys know me for a long time.
Yep.
I don't hold back my point of view. When I see something, I have to say something.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm a perfect guy that's gonna point out, hey, if that dog looks like it's sniffing for a bomb, I'm gonna tell people, hey, go check for a bomb. Well,
the airport.
Of course, my daughter's very last game is a regional tournament this weekend up in Alamo. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from here. So we drive up there. They're in the consolation bracket. It's her last game. The girls didn't show up for the first 4 innings. They were down 7-0 for 4 innings. Didn't show up. Then they come roaring back, and bottom of the 7. That's how many innings they play in girls softball, 7 innings. So it's bottom of the 7. We were the home team. We were down 11-12. We came all the way back to make it a game. And of course, my daughter's up to bat. Well, before this, he called a girl a strike, the girl that bats right before my daughter, a strike when she went to bunt at the ball and the ball hit her in the leg. So as she's bunting, she then jumps out of the way but doesn't bring the bat back like they cheat you. But mind you, it is 1A girls softball. The ball's coming at her, so she throws the bat directly in the air and tries to move, and it hits her in her leg. He calls it a strike, and then the very next pitch she strikes out. So I'm already furious because that would have tied the run. Then my daughter comes up, she could have a chance to win the game, and I'm like, this is it. We got a chance here. Sure enough, he calls a pitch that's so far outside on a 3-2 count to tie the game up, so far outside to the right. It struck her out, and he showboated it. He did the
I was going to say, and we saw it right before we went on air, and we were even considering, not even considering, we were planning to open the show as we always do, jumping into whatever is most relevant in the world of sports, and that's a lot in terms of where we are right now in the year. But that was one of those classic save it for the show type scenarios where Jimmy mentioned that. Steve immediately goes, is this show worthy? And I saw the video. I'm like, oh, it's definitely show worthy. In fact, if we could even maybe get air in the video at some point over the course of the next hour, maybe we'll even throw it up for you guys on the broadcast because it is very egregious, and I do not blame Jimmy. Really quick, just to get the clarity, how did your exit from the premises, how did that go down?
So he turned around, he goes, that's it, I have had enough. I said, well, just call the game fair. Like that. He goes, you say another word, you're out of here. I said, all I'm asking is call it fair. He's like, you're gone. I'm like, What the hell?
You want to test me?
Now,
Yeah.
I'm disappointed that was the statement.
That's
from
what
him.
That's what
because
came
I
out
was
of me.
expecting something more like, "Hey, if you shove your head up your ass, can I watch the same game you are?" Like
Yes.
something like that is what I was looking for from you.
And that's
so
one of
you
the-
did let me down a little bit.
And that's one of the longtime favorite adages of Steve in the history of, officiating heckling. Although, if you're calling out officials when it's something that bad, I don't even know if it's heckling. You're doing your due diligence, if you ask me. So good on you, Jimmy. As far as I'm concerned, you were being a good Samaritan. So
And the thing is, like, you guys all know, I've been officiating my whole life. For the last 20 years, I've officiated wrestling, MMA, football, baseball even.
Yeah.
I've done it all. So I know what these guys go through, and it's not an easy job to be an official or referee.
Yeah.
It's an umpire. It's a very tough job. However, there's a line that, like, when you cross over that just out of spite to screw over some young girls,
Right.
it's unbelievable that you can actually do that and actually sleep at night. It's crazy to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially like when you said the age aspect, youth
Yes.
sports, high school sports, it just makes it that much worse. And you even made a comment right before we went on the air, how girls, they at that level, sportsmanship, integrity matters so much. Even for us guys, maybe we will like turn a blind eye to that. For the girls, no, you can't get away with that.
Even the other team was like, yeah, that was outrageous. That was
Right.
crazy. Because they both played a tough game, and it was a regional tournament, and they played each other a couple times throughout the year. So it was one of those things where they want the best team to win too, and they want it just to be fair, and it just wasn't. So it is what it is. I got kicked out, rung up my last
with
game.
pride, though. I love it.
I walked to the car happy.
Absolutely, with his head held high as he should. And those little personal anecdotes are what make the show fun, because obviously we have tons of shop to talk, tons to unpack, and because of that, sometimes you tee it up with those personal things that I didn't even know about until 5 minutes ago. Steve, you got something?
Well, we got to start the show today, unfortunately, on a little bit of a somber note, and that is that the wrestling world and our close
Yes.
friends, we lost Sabu.
Yeah.
Known for his time in WCW, was a friend of the program, friend of the stores, and personal friends with Johnny and Nerd Bar Johnny. And Sabu passed away yesterday morning, unfortunately. We learned the news. And, you talk about these moments, you talk about in sports, and it always seems like when a guy gets to a point, and I think of Joe Paterno when I think of this, where he kind of hit that precipice where now I'm done, now I'm moving into a new life, the rest of my life or whatever, and then something happens. And Sabu had just, during WrestleMania week, wrestled his final match, which he did as an exhibition. And look, the guy, obviously the years are on him. He was one of the guys that during a time that you beat your body up and you just kept going and you kept beating your body up and you kept going, and they wrestled with strains and broken bones and whatever it is. And he had a real good heart. He was a guy that was important to a lot of people, and Johnny from Toy Shack and one of us, and then Johnny from the Nerd Bar had a really, really close relationship with him.
Yeah.
To where their camaraderie went really deep into personal connection.
And I like how you bring up the personal connection, because even just me, some of the people I follow on social media who work directly in the local media, the national media, or even just people who have close connections to the world of professional wrestling, you've seen a lot of tributes ever since this news broke yesterday. Of course, Sabu went by Terry Brunk, the nephew of the legendary Sheik, the longtime promoter. That was basically how he worked his way into the business, but then became a legend in his own right. His innovative, hardcore style, the extreme high-flying style. I was a diehard ECW fan growing up. I'll always be a diehard ECW fan. So his just whole the mythology surrounding him, his character, his moveset, just really always stood out to me and so many other ECW fans, and really transcended the promotion and transcended the world of professional wrestling, just like so many of those guys did during that period of time when it very much was a movement. during the back end of the territorial days, ECW was kind of like the last spark, if you will, of that era, and he helped spearhead that along with iconic other figures, Rob Van Dam, the Sandman, Terry Funk, Tommy Dream, you could go on, but Sabu always stood out. And what's so interesting with you bringing that up with his relationship with Johnny and what I've just picked up the last couple of days, what really stands out is just how much he meant to other people, to so many different people outside the ring. So when you can make that type of impact while you're working matches during your career, but also leave that type of impression outside of it and just regarding you as a person, that's what everyone dreams for, and that's what we could all hope to interact with, the type of people we could hope to interact with throughout our lives lives. So I'm happy you bring that up, Steve. I was planning to get to it a little bit at the end of the show, but in fact, that's something you shouldn't bury there. I'm happy you get right to it. Jimmy, were you a big professional wrestling fan at any point?
Yeah,
I figured you were at some point. I didn't know if it was in the
Absolutely.
ECW era, but
absolutely. WCW, WWF, back when it was
right.
WWF,
Monday Night Wars,
Raw, and all that stuff. Of course, we were all, and especially growing up, being wrestling, and being amateur wrestlers, we always looked to the professional wrestling as a sort of entertainment, and we enjoyed it, and I watched it all. And you talk about those guys that grinded, though. It's not like it is now, where they're flying in private jets and they're getting bussed to these nice exclusive things. No, you're talking about 4 or 5 of them cramming into a Toyota and driving 500 miles for the next show the next day.
One spot to the other, shitty hotel rooms, shitty dressing rooms. The locker room camaraderie was as close as ever been, despite the resource and the facilities, especially for ECW in those days. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the funding. It was all heart and soul, and because of that, they created a culture all of their own, and Sabu embodied that. And he's someone who broke his neck in the middle of the ring in a match. He's someone who mutilated his body and did just about everything you could. Triple jump moonsault, stuff with barbed wire, jumping off of ladders, through tables. He really was that impressive of an athlete. But what really stood out is just what he put his body through. And for professional wrestling fans, listen, we don't care if it's predetermined. That stuff matters when it's all said and done. So what you just hear from Jimmy, myself, from Steve, it's only the tip of the iceberg. We're going to hear a lot of tributes moving forward. I'm sure Johnny will have some stuff to say on absolutely give it the point. Right? No doubt about it. And when that music would hit and when he would come out, he was from Michigan, but again, with the whole lineage, with his uncle and all that, and the whole Arabian vibe, he really was his own. He had a mystique. That's really the best way to put it. And he was just so unique all on his own, and that's the reason why he will be remembered and greatly missed. So Sabu gone, obviously will certainly be remembered, will certainly be missed, and very much warrants all the tributes we will get in the next couple of days. But obviously in the next couple of days, there is also plenty of basketball to watch. Just like there's been plenty of basketball to watch in the last couple of days that we'll now recap, we'll obviously recap everything we've seen thus far and kind of, give our take of where it's going. But gentlemen, I'm going to start with the game that's going down tonight. We have 2 games going down tonight, but we'll start with the earlier one going down in Madison Square Garden between the Celtics and the Knicks. Obviously, the Knicks lead 2-1. Boston came back strong in the first game in Madison Square Garden in the series just a couple of days ago. Very much expected. But Steve, so much of the story of this series, even though we still have ways to go, because inevitably it's going to go it's going to go 6 games one way or the other at this point. But so much of what we have discussed about Boston throughout the year, going all the way back to when they won it last year, and so much of what we discussed about the Knicks, I don't think there's any secret that Boston, even when they sit with a 2-1 deficit in the series, is the better team. And obviously they came back strong. But what are you expecting tonight? Do you think the 2 games we saw in Boston early on were more of just smoke and mirrors? Or does this Knicks team really have the formula to make life difficult? Because even in the 2 games, both of them were comeback wins, right? And because of that, we talked about in the NCAA tournament, some teams just don't go away. The Florida Gators were one of those teams, and they wound up cutting down the nets to win the national championship. I don't think the Knicks have that in store for them, but when you could be a thorn in the side, Steve, to a team as talented as Boston, these are the things that happens. And when you have a player as good as Jason Tatum, but when the conversation regarding his I hate to say it, but regarding his, clutch ability surfaces year in and year out, even with him now having a championship in the mix, there is a reason to doubt Boston. I'm not saying you full-blown fade them because I think they're the better team, but this is more than just Boston being off and not missing their threes. New York has the system figured out in terms of how to go blow for blow in a run down the stretch with them, even though on paper they may not be as talented.
Well, I'm of the opinion that Knicks team was built to beat the Celtics. It wasn't built to take on other teams.
Right.
They struggled in certain areas with other teams, and then this team is really good. And one of the problems that the Celtics are having here, they're tired.
Yeah, you could see
They're winded.
You could visibly see it.
They're being pushed. They're being, kind of forced around. They're getting forced off their spots.
Yeah.
Right? They're having to regain that. They're having to fire shots quick because they're getting pushed on. And New York's not afraid to foul.
Not at all.
That's the thing. They're not afraid to send him to the line.
Yep.
And the reason they're not is because, like, yeah, that's cool. You get 2, we'll go get 3.
And we've seen the foul to give situations. Like
Exactly.
they will take one on the chin if they need to because they know they can capitalize. And that's what's so interesting, Jimmy, because Jalen Brunson, right? Say what you want about him collectively as a player, because the story is still being written regarding him. But everything that Knicks fans have hoped for in Jalen Brunson, we are starting to see. Everything they've hoped for bringing in Karl Anthony Towns as the big man, as the post, we are starting to see. And even when it's all said and done, if they head back to Boston and Boston were to win this in 7 games, who knows? Even so, I think it's telling, not so much to the fact that Boston isn't as good as we thought they were, but much like what Steve just said, New York, nothing lasts forever, and eventually these teams catch up. And Boston, right, we know Boston's formula because it's been the same for years now through multiple different coaches at this point. And the talent, they've had a lot of consistency. Yeah, there's been some pieces here and there that change. Right, a few years ago, Marcus Smart was a huge part of things. But even so, Brown, Tatum, Horford, the nucleus is still there. Yet I think there's a legitimate reason why they are in this position they are. And it's, again, like I said, it's not just because they're not capitalizing on the opportunity, because so often when you have trouble landing your shots, when you have trouble staying in the game late and keeping your foot on the gas, it's for reasons Steve just alluded to. You're tired, you're fatigued, and you have a team that is very much like a mosquito or a gnat that just keeps buzzing around your ear, and when you give them the chance to go on a run, we have seen what the Knicks are able to do, even with the Game 3 beatdown.
Yeah, with Jalen Brunson, he's just an absolute superstar. He's one of those guys that you put him on any team, he's going to be the best player on that team. There are very few guys that are better than him right now.
Yeah, he's a stud.
He's so good. However, I do think this Celtics team is much better than the Knicks.
Yeah.
And me being a Knicks fan, they're much better. All around, the Knicks are still one player away. They have Karl Anthony Towns and they have Jalen Brunson, but who else is going to step up on that team?
Yeah.
There's nobody that's going to be like, he's the difference maker.
The question would be, at least right now, it would probably be Mikal Bridges, more so for the defense than everything else.
Well, and that's why they acquired Bridges,
Exactly.
right? Was
Yeah.
to be able to play defense specifically against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
And they just
right?
they suck the air out of the ball in
Yeah.
those games. If you watch these last 3 games, and it's just. And I'm an over better. I like to bet the over.
Yeah, especially this time of year.
Yes, and watching these games, I'm like, holy shit, these guys do not want to press the ball. They don't want to press the action. They don't want to let them get out there and play. They want to slow everything down. Why? Because that's the game they know they can win. And the Knicks know if they keep them under 100 points, they're going to win that game.
Because it plays into their favor. And that's why the Knicks have very much been able to overachieve against a team, as you said, that's probably more talented. Because even Josh Hart, they have some pieces that are just dogs in there. But Boston, they're the guys in the hill. There's a reason why they've been in the mix every year for God knows how long now.
Yeah,
and there's a reason why they won it last year. And there's a reason why they're going to be in the mix for it again this year. Even when it's all said and done, if they emerge from this series on the other side, they're going to have their nicks, no pun intended. They're going to have their bruises, and it's because, like Steve said, this team, nothing lasts forever, and eventually these other teams, when they figure out, maybe not necessarily they figure out how to beat you, that's often the second step, but the first step is figuring out how to be competitive with you, and for that, we've seen the Knicks go blow for blow with them.
Well, and the other thing I think that Boston doesn't do a really good job when there's ball movement, and New York has done a nice job of keeping the ball moving outside the arc.
Yep.
Right? And it's opening cuts and all of that. And unfortunately, on the Celtics side, they're not built for you cutting back door. They're not built to be able to recover that. They're not built to be able to swing back and pick that up. They don't have a guy. Whereas on the other side, Karl Anthony Towns, he's there, and he's the guy that he alters your shot. Even if he doesn't stop you, he alters your shot. And that's something that throughout his career he's been very good at.
That's like what he's most well known for. And we saw it in game 1 and 2 late. Basically, the final possession for Boston came crashing down because of Towns and Bridges doing that in those consecutive games.
And you bring Bridges in, and that's what I was about to say, is that Bridges right here, he's like a ball hawk.
Yeah.
So if you've got a ball hawk and a guy that can alter you, a lot of times that causes issues. And we saw that when you had that shot which, by the way, I thought was very selfish of Jason Tatum to try to take. Trying to take a 3-on-1 shot. I don't care if coach said you shoot it no matter what. You outlet there. You got 2 outlets open. Easy dump offs, and you don't.
90% of the time, these pros, if they're open, they're going to make the shot.
Yeah.
Especially in today's day and
In
game
this-
when everything's catered to the shot,
Yes.
the three ball.
As
Yeah.
long as they're open, they make it almost 90% of the time. It's always when there's somebody's in their face or whatever. So yes, he should have. You're 100% right. He should have passed.
Let
that
me
ball.
ask you this, Jimmy, and Steve. I'll get your thoughts as well because we have other games to talk about. But regarding the card market, someone like Jason Tatum, who's an elite player, but is a different player in the playoffs. At this point, you can't deny it. Even with the win last year, and we knew what Jaylen Brown meant to that win and what he really did. Not saying Jason Tatum got carried, but the jury is still out in terms of what type of postseason player he is. Do the card markets ever reflect that in terms of people kind of catching on to the narrative? Because sometimes that narrative can be overblown and overinflated. Do you see something, basically, do you see the market reflect reality regarding Tatum and a little bit of a dip in his sales in the postseason?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You look at his sales throughout his career, everybody has realized he's not a Kobe.
Right.
He's not a Jordan. He's not a LeBron.
Right.
He's not a killer. There's nothing about Jason Tatum that's going to tell you that he's going to go out and win you a basketball game. When you talk about Kobe, you talk a lot about LeBron, you talk about Jordan. Those guys go out and win you basketball
Ice
games.
water. Yeah.
Yes. Tatum does not do that. And the people that are watching and buying these cards and investing see that. They're not going to put their big hard-earned dollars on a guy when they know he's not a dog. They know he's not going to go out and win you a basketball game. So you'll see it throughout the whole playoffs. It'll tick down, tick down. If he wins it, he might get a 5% bump.
Right.
But everybody's still going to look at it and be like, oh, it was Brown who's the one that won the team or the game for you or somebody else.
Yeah, you got lucky you escaped for
Whenever they
something,
bring
yeah.
up coaching, whenever somebody's talking about the card market, it's like, well, the Celtics had a better coach. You know right then that player is not the guy.
Especially in a game like basketball where numbers comes into it, star power comes into it, clutch shooting and clutch scoring comes into it. And that's why I want to ask you, Steve, because I'm sure you have your thoughts on Tatum as well. But in addition to that, and Jimmy, of course, you could chime in, do we see on the other side Jalen Brunson? Because both are in major markets. Brunson's in the number one market, right, in the world of sports. Do we see Brunson, who doesn't quite have the resume as Tatum, obviously, but someone who is kind of flashier in the moments that we all like so much, in those clutch type of moments in the postseason? Even if we were to lose this series, do we see the opposite trend for Jalen Brunson in the postseason?
Well, the funny thing with Jalen Brunson is when he came from the Mavs,
Yeah.
there really was no move in the card market for him.
Okay.
As weird as that was, because he was a big signing, but there
Yes,
was not
yeah.
a big move. And usually when that happens, you see it. So people didn't believe. And it was because of the Luka attachment, right? So now he's outside of Luka. He showed he could do it himself. Then he gets Karl Anthony Towns. Now he's showing he can do it even in a stronger clip, right? And he's playing. And, Jimmy, your statement that you're making of him being one of the better in the game, absolutely. I think he's probably in the top 5 to 7 conversation right now. He's taking the place of guys like the Ja Morants and, some of those guys that, for a couple of years that were really holding the flash. So you're going to see a steady tick. I believe he's at a place where you can still buy him.
Yeah.
Jalen
he is.
Brunson is still where you can buy him now, and there is upside for him. And if they win this series, there will absolutely be a push for him in the card market. Going to have to win the series for that to happen.
Okay, that's a good.
But that's going to occur if they can pull that off. You will see it increase. I think it stays steady, maybe even a slight increase no matter what. I personally think Jalen Brunson's a good investment. He's someone who plays all the games. He does the media. And what I love about it is that he's not, like, at the media podium, he's not afraid to, give emotion, say things, be a little controversial.
He'll give you a quote.
And
he has an edge.
One thing that matters really big in our world now is influence, right?
No doubt.
And he's doing commercials.
He's got the
As
traction.
long as you're on TikTok, as long as you're on
Doing
the thing.
commercials.
And you're doing the commercial with Dante DiVincenzo, paying homage to the Villanova team a few years ago, or more than 6 years ago, that won the national championship. And speaking of that, we'll actually go ahead and turn to the Minnesota and Golden State series. And I kind of want to open with a similar premise regarding that, because we'll see how this ultimately, we'll talk about it next week when it's all said and done, how it pans out between the Warriors and the Timberwolves. But I want to ask you guys, because you just mentioned there's a big market for Jalen Brunson right now that could be ongoing. Obviously, it'll pick up a lot more if the Knicks win the series. But we've talked about this in past shows. Steph Curry, when a legend in any sport kind of has, I won't say a resurgence because he never really fell off, but when you have something where a case where you're so relevant, Jimmy, in such a big stage, in a year where no one expected your team to go this far, even in a year where you bring in Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green is still obviously a prominent force, yet through it all, this is still the Steph Curry show. And Warriors with a 2-1 lead. First of all, how do you think this pans out? Do you think they're able to overtake Minnesota when it's all said and done as they tip off again for their game 4 tonight? But in terms of Steph Curry's card market, at this point, does it not matter if he wins or loses? If he just basically balls out, is he going to sell because he's, Steph Curry?
Yeah, and the thing about Steph Curry, though, is he's a likable guy.
Yes.
He's one of those guys that nobody can say a bad word about. Nobody's going to come out and say, well, Steph Curry did this, Steph Curry did that.
The
And now-
casual fans
Yes,
love him.
Everybody loves this guy. He's got a great smile. He's one of those guys. He's always consistently sold really well. However, this last year, he's already up 20%. Why? Because he said, guess what? I'm not done yet, boys. I'm not done. I went down. I'm probably the best shooter to ever play the game.
Yeah.
But let me just show you. I'm not done. There's still gas in my tank, and I'm going to actually show you that I'm still one of the best players in the game. And he is.
And not to cut you off, but one of the best players of all time.
Yes.
That's what this is about. This is about the legacy solidification. If you had your doubts before, if you still had them after the Olympic gold medal matchup against France when he iced that one, if you still had them, there is no reason to have them moving forward. But in the grand scheme of things, Steve, how legitimate do you think Golden State is? Because I'll say this right off the bat. I hate the fact that I have doubted them because in the past, I haven't doubted the Warriors. And even if I picked against them, I've never really bet against them. But I liked Houston in that series. I like Golden State more than I liked against Houston just because now I've seen a full series and I have a little bit more belief in them. But I still think it's going to be tough to beat Minnesota collectively. And I think it's because the lack of a big man at this point. They've always had, an Andrew Bogut, a Boogie Cousins. They could play small ball when they needed to with Draymond, and they did it brilliantly. But now that's kind of their MO all the time. Yes, it's working for them. We've talked about Draymond Green. If he's anywhere else under the sun in the history of his career, maybe he's just another guy. But he's a Hall of Famer being in Golden State and contributing the way he has for the past, 10-plus years. So even though Steph and Draymond are still a prominent force, and again, in many ways kind of doing not a victory lap, but a reminder lap, what do you really think when it's all said and done it means for the Warriors? Because like we said, we just talked about the Knicks and Brunson and Towns and how impressive it is, but we still maybe have our doubts that they're able to advance. Are the Warriors going to be able to advance?
At the very beginning of the series, I had Minnesota.
Okay.
And part of the reason is, in my opinion, the best player in basketball is Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
He is the best player right now.
Anthony Edwards is opening up things for his team. That's what real good players do, is they open up things for their team.
Creative facility.
And I don't care what sport it's in, because I think about that cup run with the Knights and Eichel, right? He didn't score, but he opened everything up for his team.
Yep.
Right now, you're talking about the shooting, and I believe now that Steph Curry has surpassed LeBron James on the hierarchy.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Because there's been so much doubt for the last 10 years with LeBron. And yes, he's won one in that last 10 years. But there's been so much doubt on everything. And yes, he's been great in the storied career and stuff. But I just think that because of the style of play and what he's brought to his team and what he's done, he's surpassed it. And look, I think a lot of people have started to, push Kobe past LeBron as well, right? Just because of the what we'll call a fall off.
Yeah.
So between those things, I don't know that Steph, though, is truly Steph in what capacity you would really need him to be. And that is, he's making the shots. He is incredible. But he is not facilitating in this series.
No, not the way he used to.
And that's the difference between now.
He is beat up, though. He has a hamstring.
Right.
He's hurt.
But because of that, he's not facilitating. And when he's not facilitating,
they're a different
those okay players on that team aren't better.
Yeah.
They're having to work more. They're having to work harder. I will tell you that their bench is pretty good. I was very impressed with how their bench has played so far. Their bench has done a decent job of keeping them in a game, keeping it relevant, being able to play, and against Minnesota starters. But even at that, still not good enough, in my opinion. And I believe Anthony Edwards, and you'll probably see it in this next game, I think you're going to see him turn on a 35, 40-point night and just go off, because now they're trying to cut his facilitation off.
Right.
And he's going to shift gears on them. And he's the one player in the league, because I can't think of many other players in the league that can shift gears like that, be on the court as long as he is, and facilitate and play defense.
And that's a big reason why we talk about LeBron. He may be the closest thing to LeBron. We thought maybe it was going to be Antetokounmpo. He may be the closest thing to LeBron in terms of checking all the boxes. And that, to me, that's why LeBron James, aside from resume, will always stand out. LeBron
Complete
James is
player.
more, it's a skill set. It's the skill. It's everything that he does. And Ant very much reflects that, and you kind of not a carbon copy because he's his own player, but the game needs someone like that, right? Because when Steph Curry with the shooting, we're not going to be able to replace that because he's so revolutionary. And no, I get it. We're not going to be able to technically replace LeBron James either, but if you can replace him with someone who resembles that, that's good for the league, and I have to assume it's good for the card
Well,
market.
and you just mentioned, too, and I think this is very important, is that when we talk about Kobe, the number one thing that we think of, Mamba mentality.
Always.
Right? Mm-hmm. You just brought up Jason Tatum. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have it.
It's the lack
In fact,
of.
I saw this meme that was great that was Jason Tatum calling for the ghost of Kobe.
Yeah.
Right? And then the ghost of Kobe comes and says, no, you can't have it.
Yeah.
And then goes over and stands with Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
Right? There's a handful of guys in the league that are closers.
Yeah.
Right? Look, didn't show off in this playoffs. Luka's a closer. Right?
That was more of a lack of depth and a
Of
lack
course,
and a lack of a big
100%.
man. Yeah, that wasn't through Lucas.
Edwards,
Yep.
closer.
Yep, we saw it the other
Right?
night.
Spider-Man with the Cavaliers, closer.
Yep, Donovan
Yeah.
Mitchell.
Right? Jalen Brunson showing
Starting to
he's
look
a
like it.
closer.
Yep.
And I will tell you, this is one guy that we are missing in this conversation that we shouldn't forget about. Again, I still think Minnesota wins this series. Jimmy Butler, he's a closer.
That's in fact
That's what he's probably best at.
known for. In fact,
Right.
Jimmy Butler, we still talk about to this day when he's a little older, a little more beat up. We still talk about him as that clutch force because he's the ice water in his veins type of guy.
So if
Yep.
if you could see a guy like that turn it on, maybe, but I just think that where they're at, and I get the Draymond playing defense, but it's a 1-2 there. And Minnesota, unfortunately, is deeper.
And it's much like Boston and New York. How much is even though New York has surrounding pieces, it's going to come down to Brunson and Towns. Is that enough to overtake Boston? And is it enough for Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry, as great as they are, and as revolutionary, as impactful as Steph Curry is that enough to overtake Minnesota? Because we could say all these things about Steph, and the other thing could still be true. And I think that's the case. But really quick, kind of rounding it out, because those are the two games we have tonight. We're going to give those a direct preview. We'll have the Cavs facing the Pacers as they are facing elimination. And, of course, OKC and Denver tied heading into their Game 5. Those games will take place tomorrow. We'll recap it all next Monday. But really quick, Steve, you were big on Cleveland, naturally so.
Yeah.
I think Donovan Mitchell's an absolute star. Don't know if he's a quote-unquote superstar, but that's when we start splitting hairs, getting into the semantics. But either way, Cleveland we knew them as a sum-of-the-parts type of team. Yes, they have a great player in Mitchell, but they just seem to be – they have everything they need in various places where they need it, and yet here they are facing elimination against the Pacers. A lot of that is because of what Tyrese Halliburton is bringing to the table.
Hallie.
And exactly, and I'm sure
my.
you guys have your opinions on his card market. But do you think this is telling that maybe we overvalue Cleveland, or sometimes this just happens? Because I don't think this is necessarily reflective of Cleveland being overrated. I think Cleveland all year long was that good, and they're the rightful number one seed based off of where the playoffs were set going into the start of the postseason. But two things can be true, and Indiana's just punched them in the mouth.
The worst matchup for them was the Pacers.
Right.
Right?
Styles make fights.
Because we can sit there. You also got to remember that they've got a big guy, too, that can chuck the ball around. And when you got a big guy that can move the ball, that's the Nuggets. That's been their magic sauce, right? When you've got a big guy that can move the ball around. But I will tell you, Halliburton, we knew Halliburton in 20 was going to be great. We knew
Signs
Halliburton in 21 was going to be great. And then when he went to the Pacers, everybody kind of like down-talked that franchise. And they're like, oh, well, that's where players go to die. And then they made other moves. This team is built to be very competitive with a team like Cleveland. Mm-hmm. The problem Cleveland's having right now is their number 3 is not getting after it like he should.
Yep.
You have two all-stars on that team that are not playing at their level right now in this series. They've showed signs of it. They've showed quarters of it, but they have not actually gone and played at that level. Donovan Mitchell's had to put them on his shoulders during this series, right? By really running it, slowing the game down a little bit, doing things a little bit untraditional to how they've played this year, because they're having to do this because that Pacers team, if they want to run, that
They'll go.
Pacers team will run.
They go.
And if they want to wait until every shot clock is expiring to chuck a 3-up, they'll wait till every shot clock expires and chuck a 3-up.
And I love that.
They play both sides of the game very well.
And I love when you see that because we saw it even in the March Madness and the NCAA tournament. Sometimes these teams are so hard to fully shut down because they're happy to take a shot deep into the shot clock. They will take that risk. They will roll the dice. And when you have the playmakers, it often works out for you. But Jimmy, speaking of playmakers, because really we have to go to break here. We'll keep our thumb on all of this, and we'll see if the Cavaliers survive and continue the series against Indiana. But looking at the other series out of the West, Denver and Oklahoma City. The reason I ask this is because so much of the attention, naturally so, is put on the two superstars of these respective teams, the two best players in the game right now. Right, you have, in my opinion, the best player on earth against the guy who's likely going to win the MVP. But between those two, you said something interesting last week, or not last week, but a couple of weeks ago, in that as good as Jokic is and as dominant as he is, his cards aren't popping the way you'd expect them to pop off. And I don't know if that's just because of the European aspect, the fact he's a big man, the fact he's playing in Denver. But compared to OKC and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, whoever wins this series, as it is tied heading into Game 5 tomorrow, who do you think will get a bigger rub, if you will, from winning the series? Do you think, again, because it seems like Jokic isn't surging the same way Gilgeous-Alexander has, so does Jokic need a win here more than Shai does?
Yeah, absolutely. For Jokic to his card markets actually start ticking up,
okay,
he has to win another championship. Right now, you could still get him fairly cheap.
Wow.
Like, you look at everything that he's done, the multiple MVPs, the multiple championships he's won. Like, the guy is great. Mm-hmm. He's probably the best all-around player in the NBA.
No doubt.
Like, if you were drafting a team right now, it would be hard set to pass up on him number one overall.
And he's old school. He's old school in the sense you could build around him like a traditional big man back in the day, but he's modern enough to where he could be dynamic as a scorer and not just, a guy down low.
Yeah, he could step out and hit a three-pointer
no doubt,
all day long. But when
and
you
great
look at
facilitator.
Yes, he is probably the most all-around player in the NBA. When you look at Shai, though, he's the MVP this year for a reason.
Yep.
He's put that team on his back the whole year, carried him through. Him putting up 30 to 35 points a game, easy. That's what he knows he's going to do every single week he walks out there. So I think they're the better team. I think they're going to get it together in the next 3 games and close it out with probably the next 2 wins and move on. We'll see what happens in his card market. If he wins the championship, sky's the limit. His card market's going to go through the roof. First off, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Canada, they love some basketball right now.
Yeah.
They're all about their basketball stars right now because they can't talk much about their Canadian hockey teams. So they're all about their Canadian superstar in Shai. And he is the guy. So we'll see what happens. I do think if he wins himself a championship, his cards will go up at least 25%.
And that's good to know. And don't worry, there's plenty of hockey to talk. Our producer, Aaron, is chomping at the bit here in the Go Live Vegas studio because, again, as eventful it is on the basketball front, it is every bit as eventful in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So we'll hit on that next. Again, there's so much to talk about basketball. Steve, you got something else before we go to
Just
break?
want to point this out really
please,
quick.
please.
Since the last time I checked, the Nikola Jokic Prism Rookie Silver PSA 10 at the time of the championship was selling for about $1,700. One just sold for $3,300. So his thing is it's been just a gradual climb. There's not been that big spike on him, right?
It's like inch by inch.
It's just been gradual,
right?
To where the point where when Jimmy was just talking about that, he still has room, but this is one of those players that has just continued to increase in price. It's the same thing that's happened with Patrick Mahomes right now. Patrick Mahomes cards aren't like jumping and going up,
through the
20,
roof.
30, 40%.
Yeah.
But the next sale is just a little bit more than the last. And
So
it just
slowly
continues
ticks,
to do that,
Piece
and
by
it's continuing.
piece.
So it's a
It's just like the
long-term
S&P
play,
500.
guys.
You're not going to get rich overnight over the S&P 500, but you put your money in your stocks, you let it sit there, and guess what? At the end of the year, you're going to get 5% on return on your money. That's exactly what investing in like a Jokic or investing in guys like that.
That's what the
where
process
you're
is.
slowly going to tick up every single year. Just put it away in the safe. In 20 years, when you're ready to retire, pull it out. You're like, oh, now it's worth $6,000.
The problem is in the sports card market, everybody wants the big boom.
Yes.
They want the
big
Jalen
hit.
Brunson wins
The
this series
explosion.
and his Prism Silvers go from $300 to $600. They want that.
They want the 100x on their money. It's like
right.
crazy.
And that's what's so cool, because it makes sense why they would want the leap and bound type of approach. But so much of the stories throughout the card market, throughout the league, throughout all the different playoff series are those inch-by-inch climbs. And that's what's interesting just for me to learn, because it's so funny how someone who is probably the best player on earth right now and a generational and all-time great even like Jokic, he kind of has to take it brick by brick, where someone who's really kind of more relatively new on the scene, or at least is really coming into his own, like a Jalen Brunson, there it goes through the roof with what seems like very little effort. But again, that's why shows like this exist, to break down and to give clarity and to further explain those aspects of the card market and how the whole hobby works. But hey, we still have plenty to talk regarding the hobby and regarding the sports slate. Again, we have Stanley Cup playoff action to break down. Things are getting interesting in the series. We don't like to localize things too much, but how could you not with the way things are going down between the Oilers and the Knights? So we'll hit on that and everything else in the Stanley Cup front. Don't go anywhere. It's the Game Day Huddle from the Go Live Vegas studio on a Monday. We'll be back in just a minute.
Comic-Con.com, your daily comic convention online. Insightful reviews, previews of the comics, toys, and games you need to know. Delightful chats with luminaries from around the geek spectrum, in print, on video, and everywhere in between. The show never stops on Comic-Con.com.
Come on down to the thrill bar. Craft beers never too far. Let's do tonight. Do what through and get it right. Rain flash, wait to do that. Friends of his, dance around, let them play. Voodoo boys to play Tuesday.
Vegas Studio, a unique multi-camera social media virtual content creators paradise. We offer high-end services using live streaming and film production for your personal or corporate, commercial or event, and campaign needs. Pre-record or live stream to your audience on multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Fun and interactive with social media comments, phone lines, live remotes, audio Foley sounds, and Snapchat filters. Be creative, get recognized, and make money. We help you by providing an all in-house production team. Visit our website at golive.vegas.
All right, keeping the fun going here on a Monday from the Go Live Vegas studio. Brett Lawson, Jimmy Guarino, Steve Johnson here for the Game Day Huddle. Obviously a jam-packed first segment and plenty more to come here on the show. And whether you follow us on, or however you watch us, listen to us, Spotify, YouTube, our social media channels, whatever it may be, live episodes, archive episodes, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and jump in on the comments as well to join in on the conversation. Brendan Allen, who's a friend of the show, obviously a co-host with you on Who the F is Frank, he chimed in the comments when I mentioned cut the nets, saying drink. I owe him one on that one. In fact, we may need a little, this is what, a smart board right here? We may need like some tallies. Now that March Madness has died down, I haven't been dropping as much. Ben, they don't cut the nets in the NBA, so I won't be dropping it as much this time around. But it's still going to surface, rest assured.
I mean, technically, that's 3 right there.
I know, right? Exactly. Does that count? Right, do we need a disclaimer? Does it count if you're referencing the bit? Right. Does it still count?
I think it needs to come from someone else.
Absolutely. No. Good point. But, you know, it's funny because right when we went on the air, it's one of those things where we thought, all right, we have something regarding Jimmy's antics at a softball game we need to save for the air. We don't want to talk about before these mics are hot. And just about 2 minutes ago, Steve, something else happened. I don't even know what you had in mind, but you had something cooking, and you literally mid-sentence, you're like, all right, you know what? I'll hold off. I'll wait. So by all means, go ahead.
I'm just going to say that really quick. If the Golden Knights fans do not show up with honorary Draisaitl jerseys for that next home game, that is such a disservice to what you could do to really ruin a guy on the ice.
He could be the greatest Golden Knight of all time when it's all said and
He
done.
could be. And if we, and I say we because I'm a Knights fan, if we can take that persona out there and let him know that we appreciate it, and I would hope, oh my gosh, I could only hope that the team in the pregame make sure to actually like really center focus on that. Like even maybe where they are like joking around and showing camera pans of people in the stands with Draisaitl jerseys or whatever. And look, the guy is an incredible player. He's a top 5 player in the league. He is very, very
Didn't
good.
he lead the league in scoring this
He
year?
is. He is just, unfortunately, sometimes in sports, you're in the wrong place
At the wrong time.
At the wrong time.
Amen to that.
And that was truly it. And I've watched that 5 or 6 different angles on that shot. I believe if his stick hadn't hit it, it would have been inside that outer post. So
you think it would have went in?
I think it would have went in. So I think he was going to, no matter what, score. Draisaitl made the attempt, which is, look, I got to give some credit to the guy. That's very tough to do, right? You're taking a wrister at 40 feet. That's very tough to stop. But again, as a fan base, I'm telling you, Golden Knights fans, this is a great opportunity to just absolutely crush one guy's persona. And confidence runs you in sports.
You have to. Yeah, I don't think that when there's some type of lapse in confidence or a guy gets his confidence shaken, it doesn't alter his career, but it could alter the trajectory in that moment.
If he is in a one-on-one running down the ice with somebody, I don't care, Riley Smith, whoever it is, and he's in a one-on-one and they're heading down the ice, we better be cheering as loud as we can that we're so excited that he's part of it, right?
Every time he touches a puck,
our
crowd should erupt.
It's
like
erupt.
he's the greatest player for us ever.
As if you have another Jack Eichel jersey out there, and that's so fitting to say because it's telling that. And we had our opinions based off the first 2 games. Every Golden Knight fan and every hockey fan in general has, and rightfully so. But it says a lot that even with it all said and done, they get their 1 on the board, Jimmy, with 0.4 seconds on the clock because of very much. And again, Steve, it depends on which way you look at it. Some may think it goes in, some may think it doesn't. But the fact that Draisaitl's stick is out there, either way, that's going to be the narrative.
But even at that,
depending on
what I think people need to realize is they were down 2-0 in that game.
Yeah.
So they were down 2-0 and quickly turned it to 2-2.
Yes.
Quickly.
And that's what I wanted to ask you because both of you guys, we've seen in the first 2 games, at least until the end of game 2, when they went 2-on-1 with Draisaitl and McDavid, the most lethal duo in the sport, maybe the most dominant duo in all the sports period as far as a 1-2 punch. But they held them in check for the most part in those 2 games until the very end. We see game 3, they get in a hole very early on, but they were able to fight out of that corner. Now, we've seen through 3 games when things aren't going right for the Knights, it starts to look, late early. But now that they have 1 on the board, it happens in literally the last second, last possible millisecond. Do you think you see a turning point in the series now, Jimmy? Or do you still have your doubts because Edmonton has 2 of the best players in the game? And even if they had got the most recent game they lost, they still have the Knights' number. Do you think that changes, or do you think, if anything, they come back even harder in Rogers Place tonight?
Well, you're never going to count out Connor McDavid.
You can't.
He's the best player in hockey for a reason, so you're never going to count him out. Anytime that he's on the ice, he's the best player out there. I know Jack Eichel, we're all fanboys for him, but anytime Connor steps on the ice, he's the best player out there. It's going to be tough to beat them. I do like the news that Steve just rolled out this before we started, that Skinner is going to be in net for game number 4 tonight with, what's his name, out again with injury. So...
Of course, you have the Stone injury. Regardless of his status, that's something you're going to have to monitor.
You'll definitely have to look at. Going back to game number 2, though, when McNabb got the 5-minute major for
that was
just
the cross check.
Yeah, absolutely dumbest play ever,
that was
especially
rough.
in that situation. But for us to then go out there and PK a 5-minute major, then they miss a blatant tripping call, which sent our guy into the board, almost broke his shoulder. Cassidy, after the game, said that was the most outrageous call that he's never seen called in hockey.
Yeah.
The guy's been around hockey his whole life, especially in that situation. It's overtime, game 2 of the Stanley
That's
Cup.
always called.
You have to make that
It's
call.
blatant.
They missed it. We should have been on a power play. Who knows how that game would have turned out. Right now, I do like the Knights' edge. I do think they have a little bit of momentum going into this game. I did like that they fought back after being down 2-0 and come right back. I thought they were going to just – anybody else could have just put a fork in it and said, we're done, let's go golfing. They didn't. They fought back. It shows how tough they really are.
And that's the name of their game. That's their MO, the resiliency, and that's why, as Steve said, they're able to battle back from that corner. But it's also interesting because when you look at game 2, the fact towards the end of regulation, and even early on in the overtime period, the fact with what they were doing offensively, they're not able to land one of those in. And I know it's so easy to say because the game would have ended there rather than with it ending with McDavid and Draisaitl, but they had so many opportunities to win it there. Pressure, just relentless pressure in the major. During the 5-minute major, Aiden Hill played his ass off.
Oh.
It was like 9-10 saves in
10 saves in 5 minutes.
Oh my God, in like no amount of time. And next thing you know, he has one of the greatest 2-3 minutes that you'd ever see a goaltender have, obviously to no avail. But again, with the penalties, with the situation, with them for the most part playing pretty well against Draisaitl and McDavid, I see why Knights fans, without being overly biased, I see why Knights fans think this is still for the taking. I think this game is going to be very, very telling of the rest of the series as a whole. Because obviously it's easy to say if they go down 3-1, they're facing elimination. They still got another one in Rogers' place. But at the same time, Steve, I think tonight, regardless of what the final score is, we'll tell within the first period of if this actually will go, the 6-game stretch or maybe even 7-game stretch or whatever it is.
What I want to look back at is the last couple of years in the playoffs where the Oilers, whenever they have faced a situation that's uncomfortable,
right,
it seems like McDavid doesn't have the same level of juice that he would. And I don't know if that's because he's trying to open the ice up and become, more, do more facilitation, or if he's really what it is. But something happens when things aren't going their way with him mentally. And I'm not saying, because look, we've seen the guy close out games, but a lot of times when we see his big highlights and everything, it's because he's blown teams out.
Yeah.
Not because he's won a game at the buzzer or, within the last 30 seconds or pulled off something. And look, he's got those highlight reel things, and the guy is incredible. But there is something to say about what his mental makeup might be. And it might just be a lack of trust in his teammates. Who knows?
So going back to the conversation we had, could it be a Jason Tatum type of thing? McDavid's been in about 10 years now, 11 years. He's been here for a while, but he's still young enough in his career and still dominant enough in his prime. If he doesn't start to have those postseason moments, Steve, despite being right now the best player in the game, do you think that will hurt as he gets even deeper into his career and tries to solidify his legacy more? Do you think that'll hurt his sales?
It could. He just continues to make the playoffs. And you got to remember,
he's
in
always
hockey, Ovechkin has won.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Remember this.
There's a lot of great players who don't win a lot in hockey.
So much tougher to win one in hockey.
Right.
Though.
It is so hard to win it in hockey. So because it's so hard to win in hockey, and that some teams, some nights can be that much better, right? I don't know that it affects him as much, but in reality, it is something that you should really look at. I do believe that there's going to be a deflated Oilers team come out tonight.
Okay.
I think that they're going to try to rile the crowd up and everything. If the Knights can score early,
that's the key.
It will be a huge problem.
That's huge
for the Oilers. And I'll tell you right now, if the Knights score early, go bet them to win by 2.
Yeah.
Just do it.
They're gonna unload everything on it.
Because then it's just gonna be we've got our backup goalie in the net. This isn't quite going the way.
Well, he was their starter all
year. They're
year.
moving, I know, but right now he's the backup, and that's all their mindset.
And it's also it shows that this is a game where the Knights can punch them in the mouth and dictate things. Even with the win, they have not done that at all in any of the 3 games so far, whether it be at T-Mobile or the one in Rogers.
Because they're constantly down.
Absolutely. You're climbing uphill.
Right.
If you could basically punch down instead of punch up for once, again, we don't know what it'll mean for the whole series, but I definitely think it'll wind up riding a different
They should come in thinking that they're down 0-1.
Right.
That's what they should think. The Knights should come in and be like, we're down 0-1. This is why I'm saying I think they'll win by 2, because I think that the narrative in the clubhouse now is going to be, hey, we have to be up by 2. We have to.
Because at this point, certain teams just obviously in any sport, let alone hockey, play better with a lead. Some teams play better when they have to rally, but it also depends on your opponent. when you are as explosive as dynamic and just as fast, they are so fast, Edmonton.
Yeah.
You don't want to play catch-up with them because it looks like even in the playoffs where maybe something is a little bit different with McDavid's mindset, his skates sure aren't any slower. It looks like he has rockets on his damn skates. And when you have Draisaitl, who's also a top 5 guy, the duo as a unit, they haven't really clicked. You don't want that to happen in Game 4 either. Again, you still have 2 more to go down at Rogers Place. So when you're up in Edmonton against a team as athletic as Edmonton, I think what you said, Steve, scoring first is going to be so imperative in this one tonight.
Do not make that early mistake of some type of big cross-checking penalty or something like that early in this game.
Seems like the Knights, like that's what we've been doing lately.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Shooting yourself in the foot.
Well,
and,
the Riley Smith one that they called on Riley Smith, that penalty, I don't know. I was very, and maybe I'm being a little bit of a homer here, but I didn't feel like that was as egregious as they tried to make that, seem when they called it, because immediately they're calling the penalty and all this stuff. And it really was 2 guys that just were kind of falling,
Yeah. And sometimes those are the trickiest situations when you get the entanglements. I mean, that's the case in any sport. But really quick, because we could make this a local show and talk Knights for a full hour if we really wanted to. But looking at the rest of the landscape, Steve, Jimmy, is there anybody that you are looking at right now? Because there's always so much parity in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's why you just mentioned it's hard to repeat in hockey. It's hard to pull off the dynasty type of thing in hockey. Even if you win a couple in 4 or 5 years, it's still really, really hard. And it's also particularly rare. That's why Chicago doing what they were able to do, even the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's pretty impressive, and it's only gotten harder in recent years for that to happen, even if you're consistently in the hunt. Like, for the most part, the Vegas Golden Knights are. But is there anyone else to you, Jimmy, right now who's really standing out to where you think that team could hoist the cup when it's all said and done?
Well, you got to look at the Panthers from last year. That team is pretty much all around.
They check every box.
Yeah. You need at least one superstar in a team. You got it with Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah.
You talk about having a great goaltender. They got it with Bob's in there. So you're telling me, like, they won the cup last year. They look like they're poised to do it again. This Toronto team's pesky. Domi, he's a little fighter. I like the guy. I think him and Tkachuk already called out Nylander for the next game. Did you see that?
Yeah.
At the end of the game, Domi cross-checked him into the one of the Panthers players into the boards. Really dirty play. There was less than 3 seconds left on the clock. He goes headfirst into the boards. Chuck looks over at Nylander and he says, "We're going next game."
And Florida has
that. Should be pretty fun
and
to watch.
Florida has that, Detroit Pistons bad boy edge to them. That's why when the Knights beat them a couple years ago, it was so big, because the Knights took the most physical team in the league and out-physicaled them. They punched them in the mouth.
Yeah.
They made the Panthers the nail, and we saw the revenge tour last year where the Panthers just went scorched earth on everybody. Even if the final scores didn't reflect that, we saw how physical they were. Are you in the same camp, Steve, or do you think there's someone else who could be a dark horse?
Well, so Florida was the team that I was thinking of, but if this Toronto team can realize who they really are, because they are very good.
Yeah.
Right?
Austin Matthews is
he's a stud.
They are
He's
very
a stud.
good.
And that's going to lead me to my last question. No, go
and
ahead.
and so I would not be surprised just if it comes and there's that scrum at the beginning, which we believe is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that motivates Toronto because it's coming after them, even though they were in the wrong in the beginning, because this is how it works in sports, right?
Karma.
I wouldn't be surprised. I honestly would not be surprised if they pulled this series off. It wouldn't be a surprise to me. And I think it would be a problem for where they would match up after this. And my guess on this matchup, after this is going to be Dallas, right? But just the fact that when you look at how that Toronto team is built, that Toronto team is deep on line 3. And that's something that the Panthers do not normally match up against. They normally do not have to match up against teams that are deep on line 3. The Knights are deep on line 3.
And that's what did them in 2 years ago.
Right.
It's that line 3 depth.
And Toronto is deep on line 3.
Yep.
There's not many teams. The one team that's out of the playoffs that was deep on line 3 was Colorado.
Yeah.
So, again, not saying that's always going to be a recipe for success, but just the fact that Toronto can run a third line out there, that is, on paper,
it's an X factor.
a better line than what the Panthers will put out there. To me, I think that could be a real difference maker. I think the rest of this series is very tight. I think these are all 1-goal games.
Yeah, I think the next The team that I'm interested to watch today, because they're down 2-1, is the Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
I would love for Ovi
Yeah.
breaking the record this year, doing everything that did. I would love for him to reach the Stanley Cup Finals. Just to lose to the Knights, by the way, because I'm a homer, but I would love to see him actually
we'd
in
just
there.
be getting that back. So.
Right.
Yeah, we owe him one after
Right.
that. He raised the cup on us on our
in
ice.
our inaugural year.
Yeah.
Right.
No doubt about it. And really quick, because you mentioned Austin Matthews, Colorado's out of it, but obviously they have some of the game's best talent. And, of course, with Draisaitl, with McDavid, and with everyone else in the mix, Jack Eichel, Tkachuk. Is there any card, and I want to just keep tying the card aspects in, because since we're so deep in the playoff festivities for both basketball and hockey, I'd like to compare it to the conversation we were having just a couple weeks ago before we got to this point. So, Jimmy, Steve, is there any card right now, whether it be a big name, whether it be a dark horse, a sleeper, is there any name that's really starting to pop and has started to pop in the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, Austin Matthews,
Okay.
of course.
Yep.
He's going
He's a
crazy
stud.
right now with his percentages going up. Matthew Tkachuk, he started right after the Team USA in the World Cup.
Yep.
His stuff started going pretty high up there. Ovi is already out of reach. You're never going to get an Ovi card if you don't.
Especially on a historic year.
If it's stupid to be buying him right now. You might want to wait 2 to 3 years, let it come down a little bit if you want to get in the Ovi
Get more
market.
value.
And I think Jack Eichel's the other guy. He's the only guy that I can think right now that you can go out and buy him at a decent price, and he still hasn't popped off to get that 15 to 20% jump.
Right.
He's still almost there. But
And
he's not there
I
yet.
think Knights win this series, right? Knights win this series. I think that's where you'll see the Eichel
Surge.
jump happen, because I think the NHL now is wrapping themselves around it, and the sport as a head is really wrapping themselves around that. Jack Eichel came off that injury, came back. People were kind of down on thinking he wasn't going to quite be the player he was. He needed that full season to really kind of like get back and really get in the groove of where he was at. Then obviously gets in the playoffs, wills the Knights to a win because that was on his shoulders.
100%.
Right. And then at that point, this last couple of seasons, what he's shown on the ice and where he's going, and he's in a market that, look, the NHL wants to showcase Vegas.
Yeah.
Vegas
That's
has
been clear
forced
from the start.
themselves to be interesting to the NHL,
You will not
the
ignore
NHL
us.
fan,
Yep.
and what you're doing. And I'm looking at Eichel's stuff right now, and I mean, you're looking at like his Future Watch, his SP to 999s are selling for $100.
Yeah.
They're like
He hasn't
$110
popped
bucks. So this is one that I think that, look, this is probably the best place you could get it. Now, if the Oilers win this series and Draisaitl scores another game winner, now I'm not talking about the Knights game winner because we got to remember he had a game winner the game before.
Yep.
Draisaitl's the guy that because he's been in McDavid's shadow has not really jumped. He's probably a sneaky one, but unfortunately they're going to have to win the series. And honestly, I think they're probably going to have to win the cup
Right.
for them to really, really pop. But he's one that I think his market's still down from what it really should be realized at. Eichel's is down from what it
And
should
that
be
makes
realized
sense,
at.
being
And then there's
overshadowed.
other guys in the hockey that aren't even playing right now that their market is so much bigger, and they're watching it from the same place you are.
And it's funny because Jack Eichel is someone who's only gotten better since his outstanding performance a couple of years ago with the assists, with the facilitating, but we've seen him become that much more well-rounded. His defense is as good as it's ever been. Obviously skating with, standing up straight, locking your knees out against McDavid and Draisaitl is going to be hard
Never a good idea.
for anybody.
No.
But outside, if you look at Jack Eichel collectively, he's been as well-rounded lately as he's ever been. And if he starts putting it in between the posts, or even if the assists start to pick back up, whether it be this series or they advance and it's the series after, I believe that not only will the card market surge, as you guys just indicated, but he will immediately be in the forefront of every hockey-related conversation, very much as he was just a couple of years ago. So we'll see. Much like the basketball, we'll keep our thumb on all of this. There's so much to follow, so much to break down, and rightfully so, whether it be directly just in casual sports talk or anything regarding the hobby. But we also have some other shop to talk. We have football. We have baseball. Not headline heavy necessarily, but definitely some stuff we want to touch on. So don't go anywhere. We'll wrap things up from the Go Live Vegas studio on the other side. It's the Game Day Huddle on a Monday. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us so you can join in on the conversation as well.
Hermit Patty's the worst. Comic-Con.com, your daily comic convention online. Insightful reviews of the comics, toys, and games you need to know. Delightful chats with luminaries from around the geek spectrum. In print, on video, and everywhere in between. The show never stops on Comic-Con.com.
Come on down to the it right. Rain flies, rain to do that. The booze, friends are new. Dance around, let them play. Voodoo ball's a place to stay.
Vegas Studios, a unique multi-camera social media virtual content creators paradise. We offer high-end services using live streaming and film production for your personal or corporate, commercial or event and campaign needs. Pre-record or live stream to your audience on multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Fun and interactive with social media comments, phone lines, live remotes, audio Foley sounds, and Snapchat filters. Be creative, get recognized, and make money. We help you by providing an all in-house production team. Visit our website at golive.vegas.
All right, wrapping things up here on the Game Day Huddle. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, and Jimmy Garino. And again, to keep the trend going for the show, a lot of activity and conversation during the breaks that really carry over to when we come back from the breaks. Steve, again, we we definitely touched on hockey as in-depth as we could given the time we have in the last segment. But you just found out a little bit more information regarding some of these markets, regarding these prominent players.
Yeah, I just went and kind of looked really quick to see what the PSA 10 Young Guns, which is kind of, look, it's kind of like the flagship rookie for hockey players, right? And I was looking to see what Eichel's PSA 10s, graded perfect 10s, were selling for, and they're selling for around $160 to $180. And then there are rookies this year that have done nothing. I mean, they had nice seasons, but they haven't done anything. They're not showing any flashes of really, like, you know, you want to speculate, and that's what guys are doing. Selling for $600, and then there's other guys in the league that are selling in the $100 to $150 range. To me, it's just crazy to think that Eichel is that low in comparison to others. Right. When you look at an Ovechkin going between $6,000 and $7,000, right? Connor McDavid's asks are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right. And you just start looking at like what some of these, you know, rookies are going for. And just the unappreciation for some of these players that are now showing you, like, I've been here, I am here.
Yeah.
You know, so, again, it's one of those things. Now, we had some news come across while we went to the commercial break that NBC did something.
Yes, that is actually a great segue there because, you know, so often what we focus on is the direct day-to-day happenings in the sports world, but you can't really do that properly without paying attention to the day-to-day happenings in the sports media world as well. And as we know, this just broke about an hour ago as we were working our way into the studio. Michael Jordan will be officially will be a special contributor for the network's NBA coverage beginning this fall. As we know, we've seen the promos, right? John Tesh, everything, or Round Ball, Rock. It's going to be hype. It's going to be awesome. Basketball once again on NBC after, nearly 30 years. We knew it was such a prominent home for the network at a time when the NBA was absolutely surging, probably its greatest era, at least outside the Magic Bird era. That 90s, early 2000s period, Jimmy, we knew what it did for the game. From Jordan to Kobe to Shaq, that duo with the Lakers, obviously everything in between, Allen Iverson. As then you got into the early to mid 2000s, they transitioned out. So now you have a whole new generation who's going to find out about that NBA on NBC experience for the first time. We know Mike Tirico, they're assembling their broadcast crew. But Michael Jordan, now look, I understand why they go after him. It's the same reason why TNT went after Gretzky despite not really having much broadcasting experience. It's the same reason why Fox went after Derek Jeter despite not having much broadcast experience. When you could get the greatest, whether it be one of the greatest or the very greatest to ever do it, and you could put them on your airwaves, you're going to do it every time as a network. But someone like Michael Jordan, who has essentially no personality, or what would it seem, the personality or acumen for broadcasting. We know he likes to keep to himself. If he's not on the golf course, he usually doesn't socialize. He's not very generous with media interviews. He'll grant one every now and then, right? The documentary that came out a few years ago. But commentary, and they haven't clarified what role will be. I don't know if it'll be like a full-time desk analyst or they may just have him on for a piece here and there, a segment here and there. But I never in a million years would have guessed Jordan would be on the return for the NBA to the NBC.
If you would have asked me the one person
Right.
that would never do something like this,
Right.
that would have been my guy. I would have been like,
No doubt.
Jordan's. Why? Because he's too damn rich.
Yeah, he doesn't need to.
He don't need the money.
He never has.
Why? So I ask you, why now? Why now all of a sudden? Because he's been done playing basketball for almost 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
So why now? Did he lose too much playing golf against his buddies where he's down like $400 million and nobody knows?
And
Something's up.
And that seems like low-hanging fruit, but if you know the conversations surrounding Michael Jordan's personal life, you kind of have to ask it. Sure, maybe it's none of our business, but at the same time, our business is following this type of stuff, and we are naturally going to be curious if, like you said, he's been gone from the game longer than he even played the game.
Correct.
And he's been gone that long, and now you're entering the media world.
And now you want to do
And
this?
it'd be one thing, because we talk about Aaron Rodgers, right? Love the guy, hate the guy. You look at Aaron Rodgers, you listen to Aaron Rodgers, you think that guy could go be an analyst somewhere.
Of course.
He's going to be honest. He's going to have an opinion. He's going to tell it how it is. If we don't know maybe the role, whether it be calling games, a studio, you can see him doing it. I, Steve, have never imagined, well before we got this announcement earlier today, I never could have imagined Michael Jordan doing television in any capacity.
I think maybe the only thing that I could put around this, and I've kind of was thinking about it, is that he's seeing guys like Shaquille O'Neal, seeing guys like Charles Barkley that are getting like media notoriety out of what they're doing. And maybe this is just to come back and just remind those guys that, like, I'm still the leader in the clubhouse. You know, Nike brand Jordan since 2020 has doubled in sales. They just did $7 billion in sales this last year.
His piece of the pie was something like $700 million.
And Brennan Allen, again, chiming in. If you want to, you can on the comments. They're open. And for the rest of the show, we'll even have our phone lines open if you want to join the conversation. But Brennan says it right here. I was going to say he had too much buried in that ridiculous house and needed the money, but it just sold. And even that, like, that's a great question to ask, because that would kind of be maybe a red flag that would pop, or, you know, some type of indicator. And yet here we are, and I don't think that would be it either. So I wonder if we get a little bit closer, because it's returning this fall. It'll be a big deal. You'll continue to see the promos, and they'll kind of round out their basketball, or excuse me, they'll round out their broadcast lineup as well. We see Amazon Prime doing the same thing. Dirk Nowitzki's going to call games. You're going to get a lot of guys who haven't been analysts now working their way into that position for the first time, and some are going to be great, some are going to be so-so, and some are going to be god-awful. Never would have imagined, though, that Jordan would be in that mix. So we definitely had to bring it up. Yeah,
I
go ahead,
read
Steve.
something really interesting, and I don't want to turn away from this because it's not a bad thought process.
Yeah.
He could be doing this to raise extra capital to make a run at buying the Bulls.
And we know how he was as an owner. We know how that went down.
With the Wizards.
With
But
Yeah, or
this
Charlotte,
this is a discussion in Chicago that's
Yeah.
been happening, that there's a group that Jordan's involved with on potentially putting an offer
Right.
in on the Bulls, because it sounds like the Bulls are available.
Right.
So, again, I don't know if this play, but we also don't know how much money NBC put out on this,
100%.
because I'm going to tell you now, Jimmy doesn't watch every basketball game.
I don't.
He will watch the first
very
game
first- oh, no doubt.
that
100%.
Jordan is on the
No
broadcast.
doubt.
Jimmy is
100%.
watching,
No doubt.
and the NBA will be the number one watch thing at that moment.
And I wonder if
And it is going on Peacock. So
Yeah.
maybe in the back end he owns some sort of Peacock
investment in like
Some-
NBC Universal or something.
has to be up here.
We'll find out more as we get closer to October.
Somebody needs to ask
And
him.
I definitely think, and you know, these media bloggers, these media insiders, they follow this stuff very closely. We're at a time where we have media about sports media, so we'll find out more as we get closer to that, no doubt about it. But I think you hit it on the head, Steve. We may just be overthinking it, overanalyzing it. It may just be because, listen, we're returning to form with our presentation. The NBC Sports is already big enough as it is to bring the NBA back and to promise people that Michael Jordan is going to be a part of the broadcast, whether it be as a color commentator or just a part-time contributor.
Says he'll be a special contributor
so
to
we don't-
the NBA
Right.
on NBC and
So we
Peacock.
don't know what that really entails yet, but either way, the fact he is, rest assured, going to be on those airwaves airwaves, you know for a fact people are going to tune in, because a lot of people tune into Inside the NBA and on TNT. It's going to ESPN next year. They've been tuning into that forever, even more so than the games. I've talked to countless people who prefer to watch Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, and Shaq than they do the actual games. Don't kid yourself into thinking people will take that exact same mindset, that exact same approach with NBC and Michael Jordan on the broadcast. So definitely interesting to note. I'm happy we brought that up, because walking out of the house this morning, that very much popped to the eye. But wrapping things up, guys, obviously NFL offseason, year in and year out, there's headlines, there's stuff to talk about, and really, even though there's no activity going on competitively speaking, the NFL's one league where it's never dormant at any point in the year. And we've gotten some recent headlines, right? Derek Carr's retiring. No big shock there. But we also had break earlier today as well. We now know what the NBC Thursday night opener will be. Philadelphia Eagles, defending champs, as the defending champs always do. They open on Sunday Night Football, NBC Thursday night, and we will be getting a division game, fellas. 7-point favorites, Philadelphia Eagles, opening on Thursday against the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason I bring this up is because how Steve said NBC, when the NBA tips off on that first broadcast with Jordan, Jimmy will be chomping at the bit to watch. I think Jimmy may pick a day to go do something, check personal off his bucket list, go fishing, go golfing, just hide himself in isolation, because as a Giant fan, that's just sheer torture having to watch the Eagles and the Cowboys opening up.
Day.
Right.
It just shows you how damn good the NFL really is, though, because they know what is going to spite everyone else in the league. You put the Dallas Cowboys
against the Eagles.
They know it's going to bring everybody to watch the game. Yes, I would love to see my New York Giants play in that game, but no, it's a Dallas effing Cowboys.
And we're used to it. They play twice a year and have forever, and we know the extent of that rivalry. It's just the opening game. The first taste of the 2025 NFL campaign we have to get is between those two entities. Now, again, the Eagles are as good as it gets. We're going to see a lot of them until that changes. And the Dallas Cowboys, much like the Yankees, the Lakers, or even Toronto, if you're on the hockey front, certain teams just move the needle. I have to take a shot off of that one, Brendan, because we know we like that one as well. But either way, certain teams just attract attention, and the Cowboys and the Eagles are two of those teams. The market suggests that as well. And I mean, again, you have the Eagles fan base who will for sure be there. You have the Dallas fan base who will for sure be there. And then you have the NFL collective who will be probably rooting for both of them to lose, Steve.
Well, and they will be. And I think that you're going to see a lot of the hatred that was going towards the Chiefs will now become mired to the Eagles.
They're the kings of the hill now.
So it's going to be funny, but you're actually going to see people coming out saying, I hate Dallas, however, right? It's going to be, it's going to be the stance. And look, this Eagle team did nothing to get themselves worse. They became better in the offseason. They made a lot of really good moves. And again, I thought they drafted very, very well. And it's crazy how well they draft.
Steal of the draft.
And their moving parts are easily moved. They're making the right decisions. Where Dallas is on the other side, and this is, from a football fan standpoint, everybody wants to know, what is Dak going to look like coming back this year? Yep. With all the discussion and uncertainty of, is he the guy, is he not the guy, how's it going to be, he was hurt, how's he rebound from the injury, like all of those things are big. The only thing is Dallas has done some things to get better.
And they didn't have an awful draft.
And they drafted pretty well.
Are we forgetting that they just picked up George Pickens?
Yeah.
No, and then they just traded for Pickens.
Yeah. For God's sakes, the guy was a bona fide number one in Pittsburgh, and now he's going to play with CeeDee Lamb.
And I'll say this, and obviously Dak, highest paid player in NFL history. Obviously they're investing in him. They're believing him. And he's had his moments. If George Pickens was going to any surefire, bona fide top 7, top 10 quarterback, obviously a top 5 guy, but he was going to a guy who we really are always putting in the conversation of, elite, whatever, even though that kind of gets annoying and kind of just stale after a while. But if he were to go to one of those teams, imagine the talking points surrounding that. Because George Pickens going to Dallas with Dak Prescott and Jerry Jones, everything's kind of stagnant. We don't know what to make of them. But so maybe we're kind of overlooking what Pickens brings to the table. If he was going to a team that we had slated as a contender, imagine the conversation that would emerge from that.
Well, and you have a new head coach in Dallas as well. Which is an offensive guy, Schottenheimer.
Yep.
He is an offensive guy.
Yep.
We're going to see a whole new offense brought out. it's going to be very, very interesting to see what this Dallas Cowboys team puts on the field this year. Their defense has always been good. Their defense has been keeping them in games and being around the NFL. However, now you add it. I just think adding that piece is huge.
It's crucial,
for them.
and they
them.
needed a complementary receiver to what
Yes.
CeeDee Lamb brings to the table. Because we know as a number one, as an X receiver, he's outstanding. Now you're only complementing him, so that's going to make it that much more interesting. And again, it's one of those teams, Dallas. They're never as good as we think they are in a year when they're good. But to be fair, they're never as bad as we think they are either. That's just the nature of the Cowboys. And again, teams like the Yankees and the Lakers very much reflect that. Speaking of the Yankees, we're not going to dive too much into the baseball landscape right now. But I do want to ask you this really quick, Steve. I'll pick your brain as well, Jimmy. Teams like right now when we look at the show, and it's still early on, but we also have enough of a sample size to really get a taste. Teams like Detroit, teams like Oakland, teams like Chicago, right? These type of teams. Do you know? Yeah, exactly. And I love that you bring that up. We'll have Aaron bring up the new power rankings. They just were updated, last night, this morning. They're brand new. But before we look at the actual rankings, we know the Mets, the Yankees are kind of surging back into form. Of those type of teams that we weren't as sure on but are looking good, like the Detroits, like the Oaklands, Chicago on a good day maybe look like the best team we've seen so far. In the long run, do you think they'll come back down to earth, or do you think there's something there in those teams and that crop that we may be talking about come the other side of the All-Star break?
Chicago's going to have to acquire pitching. Okay, they're too deep.
Yep.
They're not deep though. Right.
Not a whole
so
staff.
from that standpoint, they need some help there. Right now, their thing is if they get into a high scoring game, they're fast. Right. That's the thing about them. They can move on the bases,
and they explode.
take extra bases on you, take advantage of your mistakes. That's who Dallas is. The A's are really interesting.
You meant
the
Chicago,
A's
right?
are,
Just,
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But the A's are really interesting because they're a team that, look, that division I think is starting to show it's not as good as it's been, right? The Astros have taken a step back, right? And they should have. I mean, they lost some pieces, like whatever.
They're not the same team.
The Astros have taken a step back. Doesn't look like Texas is putting it all together for whatever reason because they've got players to do
too
it.
young.
I just don't know if some of those guys care or not.
Yeah.
Right? I look at that team. I don't see a lot of baseball guys. I see guys that can play baseball. Right? I don't see a lot of baseball guys.
Key distinction. Yeah.
So you're going to have teams like the Angels that are going to disrupt some of those teams, make that a little weird of a division. So the A's could pull this off and kind of do it. Detroit is a surprise.
It's
But
tricky to gauge where they're really going to be.
why is it a surprise?
Right.
Because the last few years, all they've done is add stud after stud after stud to that team. You go through their last 3 or 4 drafts and what they've drafted and who's playing and where they're at and who's on that team and what's happening, you can start to see why this team is showing up.
Accumulation.
It's just you didn't expect it because you're not looking for those guys right now.
Yeah.
They arguably have the best pitcher in baseball, right? Can argue that. Detroit, I think, probably holds their ground. I think they're a good team, and I think when it all settles, if they don't win the division, they'll win a wild card. So I think Detroit will be in the mix.
And we'll go ahead and throw those power rankings up now because Detroit currently is in third behind San Diego and the Dodgers. No surprise there. We know what the Padres can do for a while. I mean, I don't know where the run differential is. For a while, they trailed only Chicago. We know what the Padres can do in those type of games. Dodgers are the best team, best club in the game. There's no debate there, really, at least in terms of what they do on paper. The Mets are right where we, I think, expected them to be. And obviously the Cubs, as you just mentioned, Steve, rounding out at 5, and then the bottom 5 of that 10. The Phillies at 6, the Yankees at 7, kind of surging back upward. Brendan Allen, San Francisco Giants, I know he's happy to see that. And he's even mentioned, I mean, the NL West is going to be so damn fun. We could go on and fill a whole segment about
Think about
that.
how good the D-backs are,
Absolutely.
and they're 4th in division.
And then rounding out, again, you have the Seattle Mariners there. So, absolutely.
I don't know, though, like, to me, the Phillies are a better team than the Cubs.
Yeah.
Okay, just to me.
I think so, too.
So I would flip that on there. And I don't know that Seattle is in that.
I don't think Seattle's
I don't think Seattle is in that. Look, Seattle's got 2 horses.
Yeah.
That in a short series, that's a problem. But in the season, I don't know that holds up.
Marathon, not a sprint.
Right?
Like we
and
talked
their
about.
bullpen is pretty suspect.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know that they're on this list. I think there's other teams that probably could do this.
Right.
And look, when you look at that list, there's one NL Central team on that list
That's
of
it.
10.
That's it.
You're telling me that those other 5 teams behind the Cubs are better than the Reds? because
Yeah.
I'm going to
'Cause
argue
you
right
were
now
big
the
on-
Reds are pretty good.
And you were big on Cincinnati. You had Cincinnati as a
They
dark
just
horse.
stumbled out the gates early. Young teams do that, though.
Yeah. And it's
I think of that. I think back. Remember that Rockies team that beat the Padres in the playoffs
Yes.
to go, and they got boat raced. But that was a young team outside of Matt Holliday, right?
Yeah.
Was a young team that was coming up, and that team was really not expected to be there.
or even look at the
I see the Reds as that type team
and
this year.
you've seen it in Tampa Bay on 2 different occasions. The Tampa
Yeah.
Bay team that, what was it, they lost to Philadelphia, and then the Tampa Bay team that lost to the Dodgers in
Yeah.
2020. Those were young teams that got there quick, and it's definitely interesting you say that. But, Jimmy, I have to ask you this really quick because, and actually I'll ask you both, because we talked about Rafael Devers and his performance out of the gate. Obviously not exactly great from the plate before he started turning around, but now there's all this conversation about changing positions, about Boston wanting to do certain things here and there. Like, when you have a player like that, and when you're a brand as notable as the Red Sox, but when the season's going the way it is, and when you have the opposition in the AL East like you do, is this just one of those years where you look at both them competitively, but also the player's card market, because that's a big household type of name, and you kind of just view it as a scratch. You kind of just 86 and think, all right, 2025, even if Boston kind of gets it together competitively, in terms of Devers really selling, we kind of missed the boat on that. Is that the case, or do you think you could have a surge late?
So the issue with the Red Sox team is they haven't been winning consistently,
Right.
and that's what drives most card markets for players.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
With Devers, he came out so cold. Nobody was talking about. Now he's as hot as anybody. I think he's even hotter than Aaron Judge at this point, which
Yeah, he
is hard to
Hard to
say
do.
Hard to
because
do.
Judge is still batting above 400 and he's leading the league in home runs. So
Tied.
when you,
Yeah.
Is he tied now?
As of,
I
as
know
of, as, a few
yesterday.
days, as of a few days.
Yesterday,
ago.
I
Yeah.
thought he took the lead with the home run, but I might
either
be
way, and he's
mistaken.
having. Let's just call out. We'll throw the side by side up maybe next week as we
Yeah.
have another week. It's approaching Barry Bonds type shit. Like, I'm not saying he is that, but it's reflective of that type of production at the plate.
And if you want, like, the easiest money in the world to make right now is to go bet Aaron Judge to win the AL MVP.
Yes.
Because there is
Opposition.
0.0 chance that he does not win it,
Yeah.
barring any major injury that puts him out for a month.
Right.
If he stays in there, he might even be able to get an injury for 2 to 3 weeks
And then
still
have enough time to come back and
absolutely
yeah, I
win it.
can't.
And you'll
I
have
can't
insurance.
think of who in the AL would
There's
be
nobody
close at this point.
So you could go and
Like-
put $400 to win $100. He's minus 400 right now. It seems like the easiest bet in the books. How do you not want that money? Because it's guaranteed to happen.
like
You just have to get through the next 2 months
upright.
and just stay in the game, and you will win the AL
Silver
MVP.
platter, no doubt.
Yes.
And Steve, as we wrap things up, I want to ask you this because we talked about kind of who's smoke and mirrors, who's legit, who isn't. Are there any teams, because you talked about Cincinnati, and you were big on them due to the pieces that they have, and a lot of people, including me, understandably so, were big on Atlanta. You want to talk about stumbling out of the gate. They're probably the best case of that. So do you see a team like the Braves or somebody who got off to a slow start rallying and then showing when it's all said and done, not even just on the other end of the All-Star break, but almost maybe making like a Texas Rangers type of run to by the time you get to early September, you're all like, this team struggled at one point in the season? I'm not saying Atlanta's going to be that. More so asking,
There's an easy one.
Do you see any team that will be?
There's an easy team.
Let's hear it.
And it's going to be right before or after the All-Star break. You're going to see the Kansas City Royals win that division.
And they were number 10 on the power
And they're number 10 on the power rankings.
Yep.
You're going to see them win that division over Detroit. This is
Okay.
my opinion.
Okay.
And that is because one of the probably generational power prospects of our time is going to be called up here very soon. And when Caglione makes his major league debut, that team is significantly better in that moment.
Kid's a stud.
He is unbelievable as a player, as a person, and that's exactly the combination that you need. Now, we're seeing another flash here, too, of a player, and I think it's important that we bring this up because we want to talk sports cards on this podcast
Always.
a little bit.
Always.
I told you guys before the season. I told you guys at the end of last year, and I'm going to tell you guys one more time. Go buy your Jason Dominguez rookie autos.
3 home runs.
Buy them now
A hat
because the kid, when they let him do what he does,
Stud.
is unbelievable, and he is going to be in the mix. He is going to be the reason why they could get rid of Soto.
Yes.
He is going to end up being the reason why Aaron Judge is going to win the MVP because they cannot pitch around Aaron
No.
Judge
The protection
and pitch to him and some of the other guys with Goldie and those guys in the lineup now. So, but when Caglione comes up, you are going to see, it's going to be weird, but you are going to see nothing but the Royals talked about on every single show for months.
And I love that you bring that up, because those are the kind of things you want to watch, because they could come up to kind of bite you out of nowhere in baseball.
Yeah.
But if you kind of look into the crystal ball early enough, it's not as surprising. So that's why it's important to mention.
We did. If you had listened to what was happening and watched what was happening with Ellie De La Cruz, you would have known when he got called up what he was.
Riding on the
and
wall.
I sat there and I told so many guys. Jimmy knows this because I broke that product for Game Day at the time, the Ellie De La Cruz first and all that. And I kept telling everybody there were prospects that were bigger than Ellie De La Cruz. And I kept saying, no, this is the guy. This is the guy. Everybody's like, oh, he's skinny. Oh, he's this. I'm like, dude, he comes from somewhere that doesn't have nutritionists.
Yes.
Like, they don't focus on that.
Give
him
some
a year.
Yes.
Right? I said the same thing. Dominguez, let him learn English. Let him get this stuff. Now, the Yankees have been very slow to progress with him.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to mention really quick that I just think is important, Ben Rice is as legit as they get.
Ben Rice, and he has power. They like his distance. When they first put him into the starting lineup, there was a lot of upside given what he did at spring training. They have the power that they didn't have last year in all aspects of the lineup. Now, getting on base, that's always going to be a concern for them, just as Yankee fans, because they have a tendency to leave guys on. The running and scoring position still isn't great, but it's obviously better than what we saw. I mean, it can't get much worse than what we saw in the World Series. But Steve just mentioned it. Jason Dominguez, he was a name that was in the minds of Yankee fans, Jimmy, all last year. We wanted to see him active in the postseason. We didn't. As Steve said, they've been taking their time with him, but you're seeing the return now. You're seeing the payoff. He's the youngest Yankee since Joe DiMaggio to knock 3 out in the same game. Joe D. And we know how prominent he is in the history of baseball and the history of that organization. So when you are already in the same conversation with him, even if, you know, as a player you're still young into your career, that tends to be a good sign. Now, again, those types of things can be often, you know, you could exaggerate those things. You could put a little bit too much stock, a little bit too much interest in. But when you have a player who is that good as a prospect, who is already that good with his bat, and wears the pinstripes on top of it, do you see him selling big here in the next few years as he becomes more and more of a household name?
Absolutely.
I know that's a kind of a loaded question, but yeah.
But anytime you have a Yankee that's doing stuff like this, it's going to help. Anytime Yankees, Dodgers, Cubs, Boston, if you have any of those big market teams that a guy comes out and puts up crazy numbers right away, you're going to have huge jumps in their card market.
Especially with those big market teams, those mainstay organizations. And a sport like baseball, where the history plays so much of a part in it, we like to look to the past in baseball. Maybe sometimes a little bit too much. You could say the sport's sometimes too rooted in tradition. But we like to compare, especially in a game that's so based off stats and numbers. We like to do those side-by-sides. So, again, when you could have Jason Dominguez and Joe DiMaggio type of comparisons, that's usually, again, a glimmer of hope for what's to come. And Yankee fans
and then
are very much
I do have
excited for that.
I do have to take a moment on a personal side to just mention that Luis Araz is going for his 4th straight batting title. Just like to remind you guys that guy's that good. On that Padres team.
He just hits the ball very well.
Right. And that's what's so funny, because there's some guys, we live in an era where obviously the distance, the power, the slugging is bigger than it's ever been. But those guys who just make contact, it almost seems like a lost art. And whenever someone reminds you how good they are, it's simply just getting on base, you realize, oh, wait, there's no coincidence that his team is pretty good too. Because the guys who get on base.
Tatis.
Right.
Merrill. They're all hitting with guys on base. They're constantly hitting with guys on base.
And that's the difference. And as Yankee fans, Jimmy, that's the reason why we're always looking to the Dodgers thinking our best guys are every bit as good as their best guys, but it's those guys in the middle that makes the difference. And that's why the Dodgers are currently leading the way as number 1. But Steve's Padres are nipping at their heels. And again, that's why that NL West race is going to be. Now. It really is. And the NL West is going to be so interesting. I'm sure we'll hear from Brendan Allen in the comments regarding the Giants. And hell, maybe if we get some Diamondback fans, they'll join it as well. But either way, the moving forward, we'll continue to have our comments open, our chat room, our phone lines. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow. It was a long show today. We could go 2-3 hours if we really wanted to. Aaron's all like, please, no, I can't take it. Although we know he's zappy. He's a much happier camper now because we've been talking a lot more hockey. And don't worry, plenty more hockey talk to come, plenty more basketball talk to come all throughout the rest of the postseason. We'll be analyzing it. We'll be breaking it down, the card markets as well, and, of course, anything else under the sun. So, again, like, subscribe, follow us on all our platforms, Spotify, YouTube, our social media channels. Jimmy, we've been off for a couple of weeks. Anybody who's new to the audience, new to the show, tell them where they can find you on the Game Day front.
Game Day Sports Cards. We have our store with One of Us Comics down on Commerce. We have the one on Lake Mead in Buffalo, and just announced we will be opening a store 215 in Buffalo. New Game Day
Good
location
for you guys.
in the Southwest. So.
And that's really close to where I am. So if you're in the Spring Valley area, now you got a hub to check it out. If you're near the Arts District, you can check it out on the One of Us Comics front. They're spread throughout the valley, so they're more accessible. And be sure to follow them on social media. You'll see Jimmy on Instagram every now and then. You'll see some of the employees. You'll always get that inside scoop and an actual look for yourself.
You only see Jimmy on there when they get something really cool.
Right.
It's got to be really cool.
And there's some cool stuff they unveil on that channel. And, of course, there's some real cool stuff down on the One of Us Comics front as well. You can check out the Game Day Sports Cards and anything else in the pop culture under the pop culture banner. And Steve, you guys do an exceptional job of diving into just that on the Who the F is Frank podcast. I'm sure you guys will be recording today. It'll drop tomorrow. Have you guys been off the air for the past couple of weeks too?
Yeah, so we were off last week as well, as Johnny was in Mexico, and we had Aaron, the producer, decided that he needed to frolic to L.A.
He frolicked indeed.
But he did. But we'll make fun of him on the podcast, and you can catch that tomorrow, 4 p.m. It'll drop, so make sure you do that. One of Us Comics on YouTube, and of course you can follow here on Go Live Vegas.
Yep, and again, they're on Spotify as well, whether you want the audio episode, the version of the episode, the video version of the episode, live archive, you can find them on all of our platforms. We're excited for the things that come in 2025. We're proud of the things that have already taken place in just about the first half of the year now, as we're halfway through May. So again, exciting stuff to come, and we want you to be a part of the ride. So like, follow, subscribe, and check us out next time when we do it all over again here from the Go Live Vegas studio. It's the Game Day Huddle. Take care.